Good to have you here. This is Omni View, episode 99 for July 1st, 2026. Balanced news perspectives. Here's the news, the perspectives, and the questions worth asking. Breakdown in U.S Iran talks is pushing oil prices higher, raising costs for drivers and heating bills worldwide while clouding prospects for regional stability. Oil prices fell after Iran declined to meet U.S. delegates for scheduled talks in Qatar. The development has heightened uncertainty around ongoing diplomatic efforts tied to the peace process. Markets reacted immediately to the announcement. Energy analysts tracking supply routes note that any prolonged standoff risks tighter global crude availability, which directly affects household fuel expenses. U.S. officials have framed continued engagement as essential to preventing broader market volatility that could strain allied economies. Iranian statements emphasize sovereignty concerns as the reason for skipping the Qatar meeting, underscoring that domestic political priorities take precedence over external pressure. Both sides agree the talks were meant to address sanctions relief and regional tensions. The divide centers on whether pausing dialogue protects or harms long-term stability. How might sustained higher oil prices alter household budgets in import-dependent countries? Shifting now to developments in Ukraine. Ukrainian forces targeted a Russian oil refinery in a recent operation. President Zelensky used the moment to renew calls for Russia to halt its invasion. The strike follows a pattern of attacks on energy infrastructure. Ukrainian leadership presents such strikes as necessary pressure to force negotiations on Ukrainian terms. Russian state media typically describes the same actions as unjustified escalation that endangers civilian energy supplies. Independent observers note that repeated hits on refineries can constrain Russia's war financing while also raising global fuel prices. Both sides agree energy sites have become frequent targets. The difference lies in whether these operations shorten or prolong the conflict. What limits exist on targeting energy infrastructure under international norms? Next, a notable public statement from inside Russia. Russia's most senior banker publicly urged Vladimir Putin on state television to end the Ukraine invasion quickly. The banker warned of mounting economic damage. The remarks mark an unusual public break from official messaging. The banker's intervention highlights internal concerns that prolonged fighting is eroding Russia's fiscal reserves and growth prospects. Kremlin-aligned voices have historically defended the operation as vital to national security, regardless of short-term costs. Economists outside Russia point to the banker's access to data as evidence that sanctions and military spending are creating structural weaknesses. Both sides accept that war spending has reshaped the Russian budget. They differ on whether ending hostilities now would restore stability faster than continuing. How credible are public warnings from senior Russian financial figures? Meanwhile, scientists have issued a new climate measurement. Scientists reported that ocean surface temperatures reached unprecedented levels for the month of June. The finding has prompted concerns about entering uncharted climate territory. Data collection covered global monitoring networks. Climate researchers treat the record as confirmation that warming trends are accelerating beyond previous models. Industry groups reliant on stable marine conditions stress the need for adaptation planning rather than immediate emission cuts. Government agencies in coastal nations note that higher sea temperatures can intensify storms and disrupt fisheries that support local economies. All parties accept the temperature measurement itself. They differ on the speed and scale of required policy responses. Which industries face the most immediate operational changes from warmer oceans? Turning to U.S. financial disclosures, President Trump's financial disclosure showed roughly $1.2 billion in income from family cryptocurrency activities in his first year back in office. The White House dismissed ethics questions about the gains. The president's overall net worth has tripled since 2024, largely due to these holdings. Administration spokespeople argue that private investments by the president do not inherently conflict with public duties when properly disclosed. Ethics watchdogs contend that large-scale crypto holdings create unavoidable perceptions of divided interests during regulatory decisions. Market participants note that presidential involvement can influence investor sentiment in digital assets, regardless of formal separation. Both sides agree the disclosure documents the scale of gains. They differ on whether disclosure alone addresses potential conflicts. What disclosure standards apply to presidential crypto holdings? Now to events in Turkey ahead of an international meeting. Turkish authorities have arrested 225 activists under a ban on public gatherings ahead of a NATO summit in Ankara. The measures target protesters planning demonstrations. Officials cite security needs for the international event. Turkish government statements frame the arrests as routine enforcement of existing assembly rules to protect visiting dignitaries. Human rights organizations describe the scale as an effort to suppress dissent during high-profile diplomacy. NATO partners have historically balanced alliance cooperation with quiet concerns over domestic restrictions. Both sides accept that public gatherings are restricted during the summit period. They differ on whether the restrictions are proportionate to security risks. What legal basis supports the gathering ban during the summit? Ireland is assuming the rotating presidency of the European Union with an opening ceremony in Dublin. Key tasks include guiding talks on new Russia sanctions and accession processes for Ukraine and Moldova. German officials separately discussed military reserve reforms during related meetings. Irish officials present the presidency as an opportunity to advance collective EU positions on security and enlargement. Eastern member states emphasize accelerating Ukraine's path to membership as a strategic priority. Other capitals stress the need for measured sanctions that avoid unintended economic damage inside the bloc. All parties agree the presidency rotates among members. They differ on the sequencing of sanctions versus enlargement talks. U.S. big tech stocks posted strong first-half gains despite a late June sell-off. International technology shares outperformed their American counterparts over the same period. The pattern reflects shifting investor focus within the sector. Portfolio managers highlight that emerging market tech firms delivered higher returns amid global AI demand. U.S. investors note that domestic giants still anchor most large index funds, despite relative underperformance. Analysts tracking capital flows point to diversification away from a handful of U.S. names as a risk management step. Both sides agree technology drove overall market gains. They differ on whether international outperformance signals a lasting rotation. MGX closed a $49 billion AI-focused fund, one of the largest on record. The vehicle backs companies including OpenAI, Anthropic, and Elon Musk's xAI. The size reflects sustained investor appetite for artificial intelligence exposure. Fund managers cite the capital raise as evidence that institutional money continues to view AI as a multi-year growth area. Company executives at backed firms see the influx as validation of their technical roadmaps. Skeptics warn that such concentrated bets could amplify volatility if adoption timelines slip. Both sides accept the fund's scale. They differ on whether the valuation multiples embedded in these investments are sustainable. Anthropic restored access to its Fable 5 and Mythos 5 models for foreign users after the U.S. government lifted export controls. The controls had been imposed over concerns the models could enable serious cyber attacks. The company cited a Commerce Department statement confirming alignment across agencies. Anthropic frames the reversal as the result of close technical review that preserved U.S. leadership in advanced AI. Security officials emphasize that export controls remain a tool to manage proliferation risks even after specific approvals. Industry observers note that temporary blackouts can disrupt global research collaborations while reviews proceed. Both sides agree the models underwent additional scrutiny. They differ on the appropriate duration and scope of such restrictions. Naomi Osaka wore a toned-down traditional Japanese outfit rather than a full kimono for her second-round Wimbledon match. The choice followed an earlier catwalk-style entrance earlier in the week. Observers noted the adjustment in presentation. Fashion commentators viewed the outfit as a respectful nod to cultural heritage within the constraints of athletic competition. Tournament traditionalists welcomed any effort to maintain formality on court. Fans online debated whether the toned-down version struck the right balance between spectacle and sport. Both sides accept that player attire draws attention at major events. They differ on how much cultural expression should feature during matches. Emma Thin attended Wimbledon to support Serena Williams amid speculation that Meghan Markle might appear during her UK visit. The two women have been linked in media coverage since 2019. Observers noted the timing of the appearance. Royal watchers interpret Thin's presence as continued public interest in tennis figures connected to the Sussexes. Media outlets tracking palace dynamics frame the moment as part of ongoing narrative contrasts between different circles. Supporters of both women emphasize that attendance at sporting events remains a normal social activity. Both sides accept the documented attendance. They differ on whether it carries larger symbolic weight. To really understand the first story we covered, most coverage of oil price reactions treats daily wobbles as simple supply and demand stories, yet the mechanism is more layered. When diplomatic talks between major producers and consumers stall, futures markets price in the risk of future disruptions even before physical barrels are affected. Traders buy or sell contracts based on anticipated policy responses rather than immediate shortages. This expectation channel explains why prices can move sharply on announcements that do not change today's output. Knowing this, when you hear claims that a single meeting caused a price spike, you can evaluate whether the move reflects actual supply data or forward-looking bets on sanctions, releases from strategic reserves, or OPEC decisions. Next time you see a headline about oil and diplomacy, ask which contracts are moving, what inventory reports exist, and how have similar past standoffs resolved in the physical market. Tomorrow, watch for any updates on whether formal talks between the U.S. and Iran resume or remain suspended. That wraps up today's Omni View. Remember, the best informed people read more than one perspective. If this show helps you do that, share it with someone who values fair coverage. See you tomorrow. And if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at Nara Network. Links in the show notes. And before you go, this show is part of the Nara Network, a family of daily podcasts on tech, science, and markets, each one a short, sharp briefing you can finish on the commute. If today earned its place in your feed, here's your next listen. SpaceX Daily, the daily companion for following SpaceX as a public company, from Starship to the stock ticker. Find every show free at naranetwork.com. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.